Welcome, welcome, welcome to episode number 7 in
Seven.
our Tools to Awakening podcast, part of the Awareness podcasts. And here we are, Cyndi and Rona. Hey, Rona.
Welcome, buddy.
We're halfway through our year together. How crazy is that? Which feels like amazing opportunity to take a pause, step back, and just review where we've been.
Perfect.
Sound like a plan?
Yes.
And before I do that, I didn't know I was going to do that, Rona. Shall we take a look? Let's little bit of honesty here. This is month 7 in the podcast. It's week 7. If you haven't, every once in a while we hiccup and say, hey, this is our 7th week. It's only because Ron and I've decided to record them 1 week apart. And essentially timing is when Ron and I are recording this now, it's just a week after our first episode aired. And we got a little feedback that I'd love to share with everyone. And you'll understand as we continue to go into what we share here, why I wanted to share this. So this woman writes, and I didn't get her permission to share, so I'm going to just give the outline. She was feeling the impulse to communicate her feelings about something to someone. I don't even know the details. And she was going to write it down and she was going to share her judgment. But she was inspired instead, and she wrote it. She said she had a reason. She doesn't even know the reason, but something had her listen to our first podcast on honesty. And that's actually one of the rules that we're gonna talk about later, right, Ron? And we were just talking about it. When you are inspired to do something, just do it.
Right. Yeah? Follow that guidance.
So she writes that she, for whatever reason, was inspired to listen to our podcast on honesty. And she writes that the tool really helped her to stop, slow down, trust, stay open, pause. And by that, to look and notice on an experiential level if there was a conflict inside. And she decided that there was. She saw that there was a conflict between what she was going to write and how she felt inside. And then what she said is, it was so subtle, it would have been really easy to overlook if she hadn't slowed down and looked for it. How extraordinary. She became aware that the comment, her expression that she was about to share before this, contained a limiting belief. It was an old belief pattern that was so real and familiar to her, it felt like her. And until she looked, she didn't see it. And that one belief pattern separated her from peace and stillness. And then just in seeing, in slowing, in deciding to go in and pay attention to what was happening, she reconnected to the peace and the stillness that is always there. She saw that old belief pattern, this need to be right, this need to understand, to be a good student, to be reliable, to agree. And so she just paused and let it come up and let it go. And she also shared in this email, and that's really enough, that these patterns are so familiar. And I don't know how many people out there say, well, this is just how it is, or this is just how I am, or this is just how I've done it, or this, essentially, I've heard myself saying, I've heard other people say it too. Well, it's just who I am. I can't help it. But the thing is, it's not who you are. It's just an old belief pattern. And these 30 minutes once a month, we're just giving us all an opportunity to see things differently, to let go of belief patterns or habits or even addictions. There are those of us who believe that our identification as a separate small self is really an addiction. And there is this physiological response to the addiction to being me. This is who I am. Well, it's not actually. It's just an experience. And we can slowly and surely, by using these tools for awakening, right? We can uncover the belief patterns that don't serve us and step into something more real, more alive, more open, more vibrant. All right, so let's review, and then we can talk through how one may utilize where we are if they so choose. So we started with honesty. Rona, what can you tell us about honesty?
Well, I've learned so much about honesty. You know, it's not the integrity honesty we're talking about. It's more about the alignment. And it's about, am I in a space of who I truly am? Or am I playing that part in the movie again and all wrapped up in stories and conditioning? And Cyndi offered us a wonderful opportunity to choose. Is this what I want? Do I want peace? Or do I want this crazy story? And I love the example that our commenter set in, because it is exactly that. You know, the conditioned patterns, they're very subtle, they're quiet. I've been so used to operating under those programs for so long that I don't even know that I'm doing it, until these teachings come along and challenge me and say, how honest are you being about the truth of what you are? And then that beautiful part, which was so eloquently voiced in the comments, about something guided me to listen to a teaching, or to pause, or to step back for a moment and really look at truly, what am I right now? Thank you for the teaching, Cyndi, on honesty.
Yeah. So the only thing I'd like to add, all is well right now. Every tradition, no matter where you're coming to us, and I always know that we're hitting on something, because the hair on these arms just start to stand up, right? All is well. Whether you come to us from A Course in Miracles, from Christianity, Buddhism, non-dual teachings, they all teach the Tao. You know, everything rises and falls in the Tao. There is a peace of God that transcends all understanding that is available to us in every moment. It is who we are. Course in Miracles teaches us that we are the light of the world. God's will for us is happiness, joy, and peace, and love, and strength. They all abide in me right now, right? So that's our backdrop. As human beings, we were taught to fear, we were taught to control, well, I don't know about anybody else. This storyline was taught that we always have to prepare for the worst, and that something bad is always going to happen. That is actually the opposite of all these truth teachings. Whether you go to Sufism or Course in Miracles or Eckhart Tolle or Rupert Spira, wherever you go, the fundamental teaching is there are no problems to solve. All is well. Anything that's temporary does not define, constrict, or constrain you. So if you keep that, not just as a concept, but as a truth, and the current experience is something other than that, this honest looking will discover an old belief pattern or an idea or a judgment, something that is running the show that isn't you. May feel like you, just like our beautiful friend commented, but it's not.
Right. When there is a charge about something, there is where I can choose to follow the story, or I can get honest about the fact that I'm out of alignment for a moment and I'm believing something that is not true about myself.
And then we move to the pause. What would you like to share with us about the pause?
Well, the pause is my favorite. It is my go-to, because having some level of honesty now, I can spot when I'm out of alignment. And that is a clear indicator to me to step back and pause for a moment. Don't touch that story. Do not touch it. Let it pass by if I can. It's not good or bad or right or wrong. Try to let go of some of those labels. Let it pass on by. Maybe use a bit of a mantra there I have, peace be still, or I am as God created me, for a moment to get out of that story.
And it never hurts to take a breath and create a space. It's our conditioning that wants us to rush through and urgently fix things. Creating that space between that sense of urgency and our next step often reveals what was hidden.
That space created for me is allowing me to see differently. Just that one activity allows me to see it differently. It negates that charge, that irritation, no matter what it is, right? Because there's no differences in anything. I could be mad that I stubbed my toe, or because I got rear-ended at the stop sign. They're all the same. And that space is just a beautiful place of offering a choice. I can keep barreling ahead and try to fix this seeming problem, or I can step back for a moment and allow this beautiful spaciousness to envelop me.
And then we started to talk about trust.
Yes. And I'm learning that the ego is incapable of trust. So that's why it's freaking out all the time when I pause and step back and maybe don't react as quickly. That's when my mind at first was starting to go, oh, you need to do something. You need to fix this right now. But no, there's this beautiful trust now. God himself trusts us. And I have a trust today that I will be led whatever the next step is. You got to try it a few times, though. And I found that maybe some of the things I feel led to do next seem absurd sometimes, but I just trust them. And that other thing that was going on seems to get eradicated somehow.
So there's a number of different words for ego. Imposter self.
Yes.
Self-referencing I program. the little voice, the scared voice. The thing is, it does have a voice inside that has been so loud and so familiar that we mistake it for who we are. I know, or I believe, that this has already been said in these few minutes we've been together. Let's say it again. Who we are has never left our source. Who we are, depending on which tradition one is drawn to, is an extent, a rise and fall within consciousness or within the Tao. We are the sunbeam that extends from the sun. We are an extension of God's love and light and beauty. We are a momentary experience within the heart of God. And there's been so many beautiful words. When we embrace just that, trust it so that everything that appears to be something else can be called out and brought to awareness. That's when the undoing really, really, really begins, right? Because we're no longer attempting to satisfy the imposter self.
Yes. And truth will correct all errors in my mind. And so, again, it's not Rona doing it. That is the illusion.
Gentleness. What can you teach us or remind us about gentleness?
Well, I think the most important thing about gentleness for me is to be willing to be gentle, right? Gentleness is about being open and not reactive, no harm, no judgment, loving oneself, loving seeming others exactly the way they are, accepting what is, without fighting more. I don't want to fight anymore, Cyndi.
Would you fight?
A seemingly separate world.
Yeah. So, one visual that I've often found very useful when it comes to this, and even like right now, it's fun. There are these words that have been flowing around, in my space these last couple of days, because there are some things being let go of in the Cyndi body, mind, personality story, right? And there is some philosophies that use the term, the issues are in your tissues. And I kind of really like that. And I rest away from it. It does remind me, though, that conditioning is responding as if there is a problem to solve. And it gets activated, and it can be very, very uncomfortable. But it's not true. And when I rest in the pause and I recognize that it's not true, and at the same time embrace and be still and rest as the body, mind, personality continues to fight against because of its conditioning. In some ways, that's gentleness, being soft and kind to whatever's happening in the moment. The other way, or the way I was inspired to share, that I've shared with others over the years, is to treat ourselves, especially when something's been activated, when there is a problem to solve and a pain to try to fix. You may find it useful. I often tell people it's just your 2-year-old having a tantrum, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if I knew this when my children were two, but a very awakened mother, you know, has learned that the best thing to do with a 2-year-old is having a tantrum, is to make sure they are physically safe, right? Don't allow them to run into the middle of a street carrying a butcher knife. So provide them a safe space. And then literally I'll say, sweetheart, I love you very much. I see that you're really involved in you're feeling bad, and go ahead and do what you got to do. I'm going to be over there eating ice cream or enjoying the flowers or doing whatever. And when you're done with what you're doing, come and join me. So I've literally let my 2-year-old know that she's loved and cared for, that there is an open door for whenever she's ready. I have not told her that she's wrong. It's really not useful to fight against this. That actually feeds it. You're telling your inner sides that it can't judge or it shouldn't be upset. That's not useful. That's actually feeding, putting fuel on the fire. So you allow the experiences fully, allow it to blossom without judgment. But also don't tell it it's right. Just let it. Yeah. And to me, that's gentleness.
Yeah, it's a softening, and an invitation again. There's that aspect of welcoming some of these things. And I think in that gentleness, we're kind of turning the corner to being okay with experiencing these things. We don't have to get rid of them. That just creates more resistance.
Tell me what you remember or what you took away from our conversation about tolerance.
Well, tolerance was interesting when we spoke about it in that episode. Usually it's about, tolerating other people's opinions or things like that, but we're not talking about that in terms of the tools for awakening. What we're talking about is the opposite of judgment. If something's feeling intolerable, again, don't try to make yourself feel better in any way. Don't do anything about it in the world, because as I'm being taught, this strengthens duality. When I'm looking for a solution in the world, that's strengthening that idea that there's a you and a me and a story and a problem, and I need to fix it, Supergirl. And that is just not the case. And so there's an element of doing nothing, resting from that story, and allowing that discomfort, like you were just saying, to come up. And I think that's part of tolerance for me. Is I used to always just squish it down or find something to distract myself. Oh, you shouldn't feel this way. Right. There's a tolerance to allowing these, whatever it is, to arise.
All judgment, all attack, all defense thoughts, all comparison, any thoughts that have any kind of flavor like that literally feeds the sense of a me and a world out there that I need to prove myself in, that I need to succeed in, that I need to protect myself from. So our teaching around tolerance was acknowledging that judgment's not useful and literally not needed to thrive even in the dualistic world. It's amazing what kind of energy and creativity and insight comes when we're willing to drop all judgment. I was about to say, and be defenseless, but that's next month's.
You know, and we also talked about willingness being a key in this, you know, episode, because this is an inside job. This is not their fault.
Never.
It's not them. Never. It's an inside job. And the suffering is coming from the thoughts or the story that I'm believing, that I think there's a problem that needs to be fixed right now, or I won't be able to live.
Never true.
Never true. And you suggested doing a little inquiry at that time, which I think is helpful, you know, in regards to any story that I'm experiencing. Is it true? Is it really true? Who's the one suffering here? Who am I? You know, and that is very helpful pointing to me as a reminder to remember what I truly am. Tolerance is just lovely.
And then in the last episode, we entitled it Joy.
Joy, joy, joy. Woo!
What is joy?
It's the result. It's the result of these things that we're doing, the gentleness. You know, we see our disturbing thoughts and we pause and we join with our true self. There's a beautiful light that surrounds us shining, and there's nothing to fix. Fear becomes impossible. You know,
There's a Course in Miracles workbook lesson. I choose the joy of God instead of pain. Joy is what we are, what we always are, that the thinking mind or the belief that there are problems that have to be solved so we could be okay is quieted.
yes.
So in many ways, joy, peace, contentment, these expansiveness, openness, stillness, they're all ways of being that point to what we are when the mind is quiet.
I have had a direct experience with this in regards to the story of with my daughter. When I stopped focusing on my daughter and her different ability as a problem that needed to be fixed, changed, tweaked constantly, the joy was revealed. It was there deep down inside, just so covered with problems of a seeming world and a seeming story and a seeming daughter and seeming physical disability. And when I stopped focusing on that all the time and use some of these tools myself, she's not broken. All is well. Everything is perfect. And I've had the opportunity to enjoy her in a new way.
I wonder. So, didn't know it was going to take us 30 minutes to go through this review, but let's take a few minutes to bring it all together. It's interesting because essentially, in truth, there are no rules. Well, there are no man-made rules, right? There are, though, I've discovered that there are certain rules that I have started to wear, non-negotiable, that are helping in this rise in consciousness for me. maybe not for anyone else, though there is no one else in truth. So I'd like to offer them. And if they are rules that anyone who's listening would like to play with for a while, adjust them to suit you where you are right now, it's my blessing to share. Yeah. The first one, perhaps the one I've been practicing the longest. I don't know how long. Man, is it hard when the story feels very alive. It is this: do not take a single step in a so-called world out there to feel better inside. That rule doesn't mean you don't take steps in the world. We're taking steps in the world all the time. And the more we rise in awareness, the more we trust our inner guidance, those steps can occur without much thought. But when you discover that your focus is simply on feeling better inside, you know, this circumstance, whatever it is intolerable because it hurts so badly inside. We do not take us, if we want awakening, if our intention is truth realization, whatever words you put to it, we do not take a step in the world out there to feel better inside. What's been activated inside, it's almost like if Eckhart Tolle's pain body's coming up to feed, right? And for anyone who hasn't read The New Earth, that's not this conversation, but it's a great description of this sort of egoic need to prove that the world is out there and needs to be protected from, and we need to prove ourselves. And it literally comes up to feed on fear or anger or on being right, or look at poor or victimhood. It doesn't matter. Anything that justifies a me and a world out there that I have to be okay in. So don't feed it. And its intensity might increase before it dies out. But if you don't feed it by taking steps in the world to make it feel better, it weakens. Its ability to pretend that it's you weakens every time you don't feed it. So don't feed it. Anything you'd like to add to that?
What I've come to understand, that if I do take action in the world to try to make myself feel better, I may feel better temporarily, but it did not solve any of the inner work that was looking to come up in that moment. It would just provided another distraction and a tamping down, and it's going to come up again. And not that I'm looking for the end of all these stories, but to be able to be in the world but not of it is more the goal.
Yeah. Detach from our attachment to the separate self. I had a teacher once many decades ago, and it was funny. I heard it in an audio, and then I met him in person like 10 years after this, and he didn't remember having. He said something like, I can see where I might have said something like that, but I have no recollection. But he literally said, you know, we're all just Hamlet on stage playing a role, and all suffering comes from forgetting that we're just an actor playing a role, and we start believing that we are Hamlet. And that's what this is. When you do not take a step in the world to feel better inside, you are loosening that focused belief that I am a separate self in the world. So that's rule number one. And that often means not picking up the phone. I've noticed that.
Right.
Waiting until I got a text the other day that created an intense experience inside. And it was 6 hours before I responded. I followed guidance. I rested from the story. I remained present. The guilt thoughts that she's waiting for a response, the fear, the desire to judge, attack, defend, all had to come up and be like neutralized. And then when it was, there was this opening, this space, and inspired guidance led to a response, which was perfect. But the whole thing, the whole experience, I handed over to my desire to heal and rise in consciousness. And then as a result, the world changed. I don't know how to put it any other way.
Isn't that great that these things just fizzle out on their own?
Well, that's the work, though. You know,
Absolutely.
it's Rupert Spira, I guess. A lot of people quote the teaching that, you know, when you turn the fan off, it will spin a little while longer. And the key is to not turn it back on. It's more useful in my space right now because some of these things last longer than my ceiling fan, is to think of in terms of my computer, unplugging it from the wall. My battery will keep the computer running for hours, but it will eventually die. And so I always remember that if I don't feed the story by looking for worldly solutions, the attachment to me as a character in the story will die. Which leads me to my rule number 2 for living while we're awakening. And that is to be really mindful of where I'm placing my attention, especially when there's something actively being burnt out or dying in me. There's a part of our mind that continually says you have to do something, 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 you have to be effective, you have to fix this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I often respond to that by going outside and jumping in puddles.
As someone fairly new to these processes and teachings, I'll tell you, you know, I had a circumstance where an activity happened and I had a thought about that activity and a story was created with that activity. And there was something inside me that told me, I need to pick up the phone and call this person and address this now. And because of these teachings, knowing that I was out of alignment and going into that pause, I could literally feel viscerally, like almost a shaking, because the body wanted to pick up the phone so bad. But I had the curiosity. I wanted to see how it turned out if I didn't touch it. And what happened was the story that I created in my head was completely false. So far from any truth, even on a worldly plane, it made me laugh. And it just reinforced how much I need to proceed in this way, you know, so.
So rule number 2 is really be mindful of where you're placing your attention. And depending on what's going on inside, that could take a lot of different forms. I mean, if the intensity is really strong and you can't just sort of sit and notice your feet on the floor and jump in puddles and take a walk and not think, then when it's that intense, I turn on a favorite teacher and I listen to them teach. And I really allow myself to be drawn into their words. And I practice that way. When it's not that intent, I will jump in puddles or play with a puppy or stroke the cat or watch a cute, funny baby video, anything to laugh, relax, take a walk, do my yoga, feel the space, practice awareness, watching awareness. And there is a part of the mind that will continue to say, you got to do something, you got to do something, you got to do something. This is doing something. We get more of where we place our attention one way or another. My intention is to know the truth of who I am. That requires diffusing all identification as story and all identification with urgency and all identification with anything that says there's justification for something other than the peace of God to fill me.
Right. And that is doing something. It's just not doing the thing that's going to bring me suffering. Yeah.
We're changing our habits and our ways of viewing things. And the more we practice this resting away from the urgency, we're creating new habits. It's extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, and this is really interesting. Practice the tools instead of talking concepts.
Right. Boy, am I learning lately. This thinks it's so very smart and is so quick to answer probing questions. And I am being taught to pause there as well, because it doesn't know that much. In fact, it doesn't know anything, and it doesn't know what anything is for.
Here's the truth, as best as I can use words for it. True thought, a true way of being, is still. It's quiet. It requires no words, no definitions, no explanations. All of the tools that we're discussing here open doors into that.
Yes.
And when you discover a whole bunch of attempting to understand or define or decide that this teaching is better than that teaching, what I could let you know is that's another aspect of that same sort of false imposter self that is attempting to get you to act in the world.
Something. Yeah.
Instead, if you choose to notice when you're judging and create a pause, like acknowledge, oh, there's a judgment thought. It feels real. I'm going to trust that it's not, and pause and let it wiggle and attempt to defend itself, and continue to trust that joy is what I am when I'm not judging. Trust that the pause will get me a rise in consciousness. Practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, I had to actually do these things in order to have the direct experience of the result we were looking for, which is peace and calm and just being able to be aware in awareness rather than sucked in to everything else. I wouldn't be able to speak about that today had I not actually done the practice rather than read about it, listened to it. Oh, that sounds like a great idea. Take tons of notes. That's what my head, like tons of notes, right? And then never go back and review them or do what was suggested. Knowledge, worldly knowledge in this way is not serving me. It's feeding that imposter self.
So one of the things I hope you become aware of through this year-long series, is that the tools that we're pointing to, you will be able to find in whatever modality you choose to follow, in whatever teacher lights you up. You're going to find them teaching these tools. I have no attachment to whether or not you label yourself as someone who loves the non-dual teachings or A Course in Miracles or Christianity or Buddhism or Sufism, or if you go and hang out in an ashram somewhere in India and learn from a guru. It doesn't matter. These teachings are truth teachings. They're universal. You'll find them in all of that.
Yes, absolutely.
The fourth rule is that when you feel an impulse that seems to come out of nowhere, inner guidance, to go right instead of left, follow it. Don't question it. Now, if the guidance tells you to take all your clothes off and run out into the middle of the street or drive with your eyes closed, recognize that that's not inner guidance. And it would only be that imposter self that is going to argue with me on this point. There is a feeling sense to listen to this teacher or to do this thing, or and it may not be perfect. It takes some practice to really hear it, but you can hear it. Most recently, I had something on Saturday, and I went to inner guidance, and I was like, help me with correction, help me to see this clearly. How do I handle this? And I was told to watch a movie and take notes. And I literally said, I don't want to. And when I said that, inner guidance just got real quiet. I stopped all other plans and I sat down and I watched the movie and I took 4 pages of notes. And about an hour later, the problem was resolved. The so-called worldly problem was resolved. And the inner pain of the whole experience stopped. It was like I asked, I was told what to do. Mm-hmm. I could hear the inner resistance. I did it anyway. What was needed occurred. There was an opening inside, and then action in the world took place. Follow inner guidance when it's given. If you ask for an explanation, you won't receive it. If you want to know the outcome of why you're being guided, you will not be shown. If you want to know how it's going to end up, not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Ask for and follow the guidance given. That's it.
That's a great wrap up of what we've done so far.
It certainly is. And we've spoken longer than we normally have. And so I don't want to keep people too much longer, other than to say I love us very much. I love that we got comments. I've had a couple of people reach out to me. And then, what we shared there. Our goal is simple, clear guidance / tools that you can practice and incorporate into your life with everything else you're doing. And so that's all I got.
It's been another terrific episode.
I love us very much.
I love us as well.
All right. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.